Admiral Jake Morrison walked slowly across the bridge of the UES Phoenix. The massive warship floated in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter, its hull gleaming under the distant light of the sun. Jake had commanded this ship for 3 years now, and he knew every sound it made, every vibration that ran through its metal bones. Today felt different, though. The crew seemed restless, like they were waiting for something to happen. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from the sensor stations. Jake looked out through the main view screen at the stars beyond. Humanity had been exploring space for over 200 years now, but they had never found anyone else out there. No aliens, no ancient ruins, no signs that Earth was not alone in the universe. Sometimes Jake wondered if they ever would. Lisa Taylor sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she monitored the deep space channels. She was young for her rank, only 28, but she was the best communications officer in the fleet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her brown eyes were focused on the data streaming across her screens. Suddenly, Lisa's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide and she pressed her hand against her earpiece. Jake saw her expression change from confusion to excitement to something that looked like fear. "Admiral," Lisa said, her voice slightly shaky. "I'm picking up something on the long-range sensors. It's coming from beyond the outer rim." Jake moved quickly to her station. The other officers on the bridge turned to look at them. Commander Helen Brooks, the ship's executive officer, stood up from her chair and walked over to join them. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and the kind of steady presence that made everyone around her feel calmer. "What kind of signal?" Jake asked. Lisa's fingers moved over her controls, bringing up a visual display on the main screen. "It's not like anything in our databases, sir. The pattern is complex, but it repeats every 12 hours. Look at this." The screen showed a series of mathematical sequences that pulsed in a regular rhythm. The numbers were arranged in ways that human computers had never seen before, but there was clearly intelligence behind them. Whoever had sent this signal understood mathematics and physics at a very advanced level. "Could it be from one of our deep space probes?" Helen asked. Lisa shook her head. "No, ma'am. I've checked all our equipment. This is coming from a star system that's not on any of our charts. It's about 40 light years from here, in a direction we've never explored." Jake felt his heart rate increase. In all his years in the fleet, he had dreamed about this moment. First contact with an alien civilization. But now that it might be happening, he realized how unprepared humanity really was. "Can you decode it?" he asked. "I'm trying, sir," Lisa replied. "The signal contains what looks like star charts and some kind of technical specifications, but there's something else. The mathematical patterns suggest whoever sent this is in distress." Captain Ryan Wood's voice crackled over the communications system from his destroyer, the UES Falcon. His ship was positioned near the Jupiter colonies, about 6 hours away from the Phoenix. "Admiral Morrison, we're picking up the same transmission. Over here, our science officer thinks it might be some kind of distress call. The signal strength suggests it's being broadcast with enormous power, like whoever sent it really wants to be heard." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had trained their entire careers for exploration and defense of human space. None of them had ever expected to face the possibility of contact with an alien species. But here they were, and the decision of how to respond fell to him. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker looked up from the navigation station. He was a quiet man in his 30s, with the kind of precise mind that was perfect for calculating jump coordinates across interstellar space. "Admiral, if this really is a distress call, we have a responsibility to respond. The Galactic Accords that Earth signed require us to assist any vessel in distress, regardless of origin. The Galactic Accords were written assuming we'd eventually meet other species," Helen pointed out. "But we never really planned for what would happen when we did." Jake nodded slowly. She was right. Humanity had always assumed they would meet aliens eventually, but they had imagined it would be a gradual process. Maybe radio signals back and forth across the years, slowly building understanding. Not a sudden distress call from the darkness. Lisa, how long would it take to reach the source of the signal? Jake asked. She consulted her computer. About 2 weeks with our current jump drive technology, sir. But we'd need to plot the course carefully. That region of space is completely unexplored. The bridge was silent for a moment as everyone considered the implications. If they responded to this signal, they would be making humanity's first contact with an alien species. If they were wrong about what the signal meant, they could be flying into a trap. If they were right, they might be the only hope for whoever had sent it. Jake made his decision. Helen, send a message to Earth Command. Inform them that we have detected what appears to be an alien distress signal and that I am assembling a response fleet. Steve, start plotting jump coordinates to the signal source. Lisa, keep monitoring that transmission and try to learn everything you can about it. What kind of fleet are you thinking about, sir? Helen asked. Jake looked out at the stars again. The biggest one humanity has ever assembled. Pull ships from Earth Defense Command, Mars Colonial Fleet, and the Outer System Patrol. If we're going to make first contact, we're going to do it properly. Over the next few hours, the space around the Phoenix filled with ships. Destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and support vessels all answered the call. Captain Amy Foster arrived with the UES Ranger, bringing her Marines and her reputation as the best tactical officer in the fleet. Dr. Kevin Nash came aboard the Phoenix with his science team, ready to study whatever they might find. As Jake watched the fleet assemble, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Humanity was about to step onto the galactic stage for the first time. They had no idea what they would find out there in the darkness, but they were going anyway. Because that was what humans did. When someone called for help, they answered. The signal continued to repeat its mysterious message every 12 hours, a lonely voice calling across the void. And humanity was finally ready to answer. The human fleet dropped out of jump space with a flash of blue light that illuminated the darkness around them. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UZ Phoenix, watching as 50 ships spread out in formation around the flagship. The journey had taken 2 weeks, and every day the alien signal had grown stronger. Now they were finally at its source. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. A massive alien vessel drifted in the emptiness between 2 dead planets. The ship was enormous, nearly 20 kilometers long and shaped like nothing human engineers had ever conceived. Its hull curved and flowed like something grown rather than built, with patterns that seemed almost organic. Parts of the ship were clearly damaged, with entire sections missing and debris fields spreading out from the wounds in its side. "My God," whispered Dr. Kevin Nash from his position at the science station. His instruments were going crazy, detecting energy patterns and materials that didn't exist in any human database. The technology readings from that ship are incredible. Their power systems alone are centuries ahead of anything we have. Captain Amy Foster's voice came over the communications channel from her ship, the UES Ranger. She had moved her vessel closer to the alien craft, her Marines ready for anything. "Admiral, I'm detecting multiple life signs aboard that ship. Whatever species built it, some of them are still alive." Jake felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Humanity's first contact with alien life was happening right now, and he was responsible for how it went. Every decision he made in the next few hours could determine the future relationship between humans and whatever species had built this incredible vessel. "Amy, take your team and approach carefully," Jake ordered. "Use the standard first contact protocols, but be ready for anything." Lisa, try to establish communication with whoever is on that ship. Lisa Taylor worked frantically at her station, adjusting frequencies and trying every communication method the human fleet possessed. The alien signal was still broadcasting, but now they could tell it was coming from the damaged ship itself. The mathematical patterns were more complex up close, filled with data that would take years to fully understand. Captain Foster guided the UES Ranger toward the alien vessel with extreme care. As they got closer, the true scale of the ship became apparent. It was like approaching a floating city, with structures and towers that reached up from its hull like the spires of some impossible cathedral. The damage was even more extensive than they had first thought, with entire sections of the ship simply gone, as if something had taken massive bites out of it. "I'm seeing docking ports along the port side," reported Foster. "They look different from our designs, but I think we can make it work. The ship's gravity field is still active, so whoever built it understands artificial gravity as well as we do." Dr. Nash studied his readings carefully. "Amy, be very careful when you board. The atmosphere inside that ship is completely different from what humans can breathe. You'll need full environmental suits, and even then I can't guarantee there'll be enough protection." Foster and her team suited up in the best protective gear humanity had developed. The environmental suits were bulky but reliable, designed to keep humans alive in the harshest conditions space could offer. As the Ranger docked with the alien ship, everyone held their breath. The docking process was surprisingly smooth. Whatever species had built this vessel, they understood the basic principles of spacecraft design. The airlock sealed properly and the connection held firm. Foster led her team of 6 Marines and scientists through the airlock and into the alien ship. What they found on the other side took their breath away. The corridors of the alien ship were vast and beautiful, with walls that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The architecture was flowing and organic, like walking through the inside of some enormous living creature. Strange symbols covered the walls, pulsing with soft colors that shifted and changed as they watched. "The air in here is breathable for us, but only barely," reported the team's medic as he checked his instruments. "High nitrogen content, low oxygen. We can survive here for a few hours, but not much longer." As they moved deeper into the ship, they began to encounter the aliens themselves. The creatures were tall and graceful, with long limbs and skin that seemed to shift between different shades of blue and green. Their faces were elongated, with large eyes that reflected the light from their environmental suits. Most of them appeared to be unconscious, lying in what looked like medical beds or stasis pods. One of the aliens was awake, standing near what appeared to be a control console. When it saw the humans, it froze for a moment, its large eyes widening with what might have been surprise or fear. Then it began to speak in a voice that was musical and strange, like hearing someone sing underwater. Dr. Nash, monitoring from the Phoenix, worked quickly to analyze the alien language. The universal translator that had been developed for possible first contact scenarios began to process the sounds, comparing them to linguistic patterns in human databases. After several minutes of careful communication, the translation began to work. The aliens' words became understandable, though still strange and difficult to follow. "You are not the Devourers," the alien said, its voice filled with relief. "You are something else. Something new." Foster stepped forward carefully, her hands visible and empty to show she meant no harm. "We are humans. We received your signal and came to help. Are you in distress?" The alien's response chilled everyone who heard it. "We are the last of the Kaleri," it said. "Our homeworld is gone, consumed by the Devourers. They strip planets bare of all life, all resources, everything. Our ship carries the final survivors of our people, 50,000 souls in stasis sleep." The alien gestured to the damaged sections of the ship. "The Devourers found us as we fled. They damaged our power systems. Without help, we will all die within days. The stasis pods are failing." Foster looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them, at the beautiful and tragic aliens who had built it. She thought about the 50,000 lives hanging in the balance, about the responsibility that humanity had suddenly inherited. "We'll help you," she said simply. "That's what we came here to do." But even as she spoke, she wondered if humanity was ready for what they were about to face. The Devourers sounded like something out of a nightmare. And if they had destroyed an entire civilization as advanced as the Kaleri, what chance did humans have against them? 3 days had passed since the human fleet arrived at the Kaleri ship. The rescue operation was going well, with human engineers working alongside the surviving Kaleri to repair their damaged power systems. Dr. Kevin Nash had barely slept, spending every waking hour studying the incredible alien technology and learning from the Kaleri, scientists who had awakened from their emergency stasis pods. "Admiral," Jake Morrison stood in the temporary command center that had been set up aboard the alien vessel. The room was filled with both human and Kaleri personnel working together, their voices mixing in a strange harmony as they coordinated the repair efforts. Despite the language barriers, the universal translators were working better each day, and the two species were beginning to understand each other. Commander Helen Brooks approached him with a concerned expression on her face. She had been coordinating the evacuation procedures, preparing to move the most critically injured Kaleri to human medical facilities if their own systems failed completely. "Admiral, we have a problem," Helen said quietly. "Lieutenant Commander, Danny Cooper is reporting unusual sensor readings from his position on the UES Hawk. Multiple contacts approaching the system at extremely high speed." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Hawk was their most advanced reconnaissance vessel, equipped with the best long-range sensors in the human fleet. If Danny was seeing something out there, it was real and it was coming their way. "How many contacts?" Jake asked. "At least 30, sir. They're moving faster than anything we've ever recorded. Their trajectory puts them here in less than 6 hours. Jake turned to the Kaleri scientist who had been working with Dr. Nash. The alien's name was difficult for humans to pronounce, but they had settled on calling him Blue because of the deep blue coloration of his skin. Blue had been one of the lead researchers on the Kaleri homeworld before the Devourers came. "Blue, we're detecting ships approaching this system. Could they be more of your people?" The Kaleri scientist looked at the sensor data on Jake's portable display. His large eyes went wide with terror, and his skin shifted to a darker, almost black color. The change was so dramatic that every human in the room stopped what they were doing to stare. "No," Blue said, his translated voice shaking with fear. "Those are not Kaleri ships. The energy signatures, the speed, the formation, those are Devourer vessels. They have found us." The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Jake felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. He had brought 50 human ships and thousands of crew members to this remote system to help refugees. Now they were about to face an enemy that had destroyed an entire civilization. "Tell me about their ships," Jake said to Blue. "What are we facing?" Blue's skin continued to shift colors as his fear grew. "The Devourers do not build ships the way living beings do. Their vessels are created by artificial intelligences that have consumed their original creators. The ships themselves are weapons designed only for destruction and harvesting of resources." Dr. Nash looked up from his analysis of the sensor data. "Admiral, these readings don't make sense. The approaching vessels appear to be absorbing electromagnetic radiation rather than reflecting it. It's like they're made of some kind of material that eats light itself." Captain Amy Foster's voice crackled over the communication system from the UES Ranger. "Admiral, my Marines are reporting that the Kaleri crew members are becoming increasingly agitated. Some of them are asking to be put back into stasis rather than face what's coming." Jake understood their fear, but he also knew that running was not an option. The human fleet was too far from home to retreat quickly, and they couldn't abandon 50,000 innocent lives to die at the hands of these Devourer machines. "Blue, what kind of weapons do the Devourers use?" Jake asked. The Kaleri scientist's translated words came slowly, as if he was remembering something too terrible to speak about. "Energy weapons that adapt to whatever defenses they encounter. The more you fight them, the stronger they become. They learn from every battle, every tactic, every weapon you use against them." Commander Katie Bell, the fleet's chief engineer, had been listening to the conversation while working on the Kaleri power systems. She was a practical woman who approached problems with methodical precision, but even she looked troubled by what they were hearing. "Admiral, if what Blue is saying is true, then conventional military tactics might not work against these things. We need to think of something they haven't encountered before." Captain Ryan Woods joined the conversation from his destroyer, the UES Falcon. His ship was positioned on the outer edge of the system, ready to provide early warning of the approaching enemy. "Admiral, I'm getting better sensor readings now that they're closer." The Devourer ships are moving in perfect formation like a swarm of insects. There are exactly 36 vessels arranged in groups of 6. Jake studied the tactical display that Dr. Nash had created using both human and Kaleri sensor data. The approaching enemy fleet was larger than the human force, but not overwhelmingly so. What worried him more was the description of their adaptive weapons and learning capabilities. Blue, have the Devourers ever been defeated in battle? Jake asked. The Kaleri scientist was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a civilization's final memories. Once, many cycles ago, a species called the Vorthik managed to destroy several Devourer ships using weapons that created artificial black holes. But the Devourers learned from that battle too. When they returned, they had developed defenses against gravitational weapons. The Vorthak homeworld was consumed 3 days later. The implications of this information hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. They were facing an enemy that not only learned from every battle, but used that knowledge to become stronger. Every human tactic, every weapon, every strategy they employed would only make the Devourers more dangerous for the next species they encountered. Jake looked around at his officers and crew, at the Kaleri scientists who had become their unexpected allies. These people were counting on him to find a way out of an impossible situation. The human fleet was about to face its first interstellar war, and they were going into it blind. How long until they arrive? He asked. Danny Cooper's voice came over. The communications from the Hawk. 4 hours and 37 minutes, Admiral. They're slowing down as they approach the system, probably scanning for threats. Jake made his decision. All ships, battle stations. Begin evacuation of critical Kaleri personnel to human vessels. Katie, I need you to work with Blue and his team to see if we can get any of the Kaleri weapons online. As alarms began sounding. Throughout the fleet, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity was about to make its last stand. The Devourer ships appeared on the edge of the system like dark shadows against the stars. They moved with perfect coordination, their black hulls seeming to absorb the light around them and give nothing back. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES Phoenix as the enemy fleet approached, 36 vessels of destruction that had already consumed countless worlds. The first shots came without warning or attempt at communication. Blue energy beams lanced across space, striking the human destroyer UE's Thunder before anyone could react. The ship's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before the Devourer weapons adapted to their frequency and tore through them like paper. The Thunder exploded in a ball of fire and debris, taking all 200 crew members with it. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered, his voice calm despite the horror he had just witnessed. Return fire with everything we have. The human fleet responded instantly. 50 ships opened fire with plasma cannons, missile batteries, and railgun systems. The space between the two fleets filled with deadly light as weapons fired at maximum capacity. For a moment, it looked like the human weapons were having an effect. Several Devourer ships flickered as their shields took damage, but the victory was short-lived. Captain Ryan Wood's voice came over the communications from the UES Falcon. Admiral, their shields are adapting to our weapons. My plasma cannons are having less effect with each shot. Jake watched in growing horror as the Devourer ships began to shrug off human weapons, like they were nothing more than flashlights. The enemy had learned the frequency and power, signatures of every weapon in the human arsenal within minutes of the battle starting. Katie, status on the Kaleri weapons? Jake asked. Commander Katie Bell's voice was strained as she worked frantically with the alien technology. We've got 2 of their energy cannons online, Admiral. But Blue is warning us that the Devourers will adapt to those 2 once they see them in action. Captain Amy Foster was leading the evacuation efforts aboard the massive Kaleri ship while the battle raged around them. Her Marines worked alongside Kaleri technicians to move the most critical stasis pods to human vessels, racing against time as the enemy grew closer. Admiral, we're making progress with the evacuation, but it's slow going, Foster reported. These pods require specialized life support systems. Dr. Patricia Adams is working to adapt our medical bays. But she needs more time, Dr. Adams was. The fleet's chief medical officer, a brilliant woman who had spent years studying alien biology in preparation for first contact. Now she was trying to save lives she had never imagined could exist, working with technology that was centuries ahead of human medicine. The battle continued to rage as more human ships fell to the Devourer weapons. The UES Lightning, the UES Storm, and the UES Comet were all destroyed within the first hour of fighting. Each loss represented hundreds of lives and years of training and experience that humanity could not afford to lose, but Jake began to notice something the Devourers had not expected. Human tactics were different from anything they had faced before. Where other species had fought with logic and predictable patterns, humans fought with creativity and desperate innovation. Commander Helen Brooks coordinated a series of attacks that the Devourers' artificial intelligence systems struggled to understand. Human ships would attack from one direction, then suddenly jump away and appear somewhere completely different. They used debris fields as cover, performed ramming attacks when their weapons failed, and even tried to ram enemy ships with their own damaged vessels. "Helen, I'm seeing something in their response patterns," Jake said, studying the tactical display. "They're having trouble adapting to our chaos. Their eye systems are built for logical warfare, not the crazy stuff we're doing." Helen nodded, understanding immediately. They expect their enemies to fight efficiently and logically? But humans fight with emotion and desperation. "We do things that don't make tactical sense, and their computers can't predict that." Jake had an idea. It was dangerous and probably insane, but it might be their only chance. "All ships, listen carefully. We're going to try something the Devourers have never seen before. I need every ship to perform synchronized jump attacks. Appear at point-blank range, fire everything you have, then jump away immediately." The plan required precise timing and coordination. Each ship would have to calculate its jump coordinates perfectly, appear exactly where they needed to be, and escape before the Devourers could respond. One mistake would mean certain death. Captain Woods volunteered to lead the first wave. UES Falcon moving into position, all weapons charged and ready. The attack began with 6 human ships jumping into the middle of the Devourer formation. They appeared less than a kilometer from their targets and fired everything they had before the enemy could react. Plasma cannons, missiles, and railgun rounds poured into the dark hulls at point-blank range. 2 Devourer ships exploded immediately, their adaptive shields unable to compensate for the sudden close-range assault. The human ships jumped away. Just as return fire began, leaving the enemy weapons to hit empty space. "It worked," Helen said with amazement. "Their shields couldn't adapt fast enough to close-range attacks." But the victory came at a terrible price. The UES Falcon had taken a direct hit just as it tried to jump away. Captain Wood's final transmission was brief and professional. "Good luck, Admiral. Make it count." The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking Woods and his entire crew with it. Jake felt the loss like a physical blow, but he couldn't afford to grieve now. There were still thousands of lives depending on his decisions. The synchronized jump attacks continued, with human ships appearing and disappearing like deadly ghosts. The Devourers began to adapt their tactics, but they were still struggling with the unpredictable nature of human warfare. More enemy ships fell, but the human losses were mounting too. By the end of the 4th hour of battle, half the human fleet was gone. The survivors were running low on ammunition and power, their ships battered and barely holding together. The evacuation of the Caleri was only halfway complete, and the Devourer ships were closing in on the refugee vessel. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his surviving crew. They were tired and scared, but they were still fighting. It was what humans did. Even when faced with impossible odds, they kept fighting for what they believed in. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and Jake knew that everything depended on what happened next. The remaining human ships formed a desperate defensive line around the Caleri vessel as the Devourer fleet closed in for the final attack. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Phoenix. watching his tactical display as red icons representing enemy ships moved steadily toward them. Half his fleet was gone, and the survivors were running out of time and options. Blue, the Kaleri scientist, approached Jake with something that looked like both hope and terror in his large alien eyes. His skin had shifted to a deep purple color. That Jake had learned meant the alien was experiencing intense stress. Admiral Morrison, there is one final option, Blue said through the universal translator. Our ship carries a weapon of last resort, something we hoped never to use. It can create a tear in space-time itself, a wound in reality that will destroy everything within a large area. Dr. Kevin Nash looked up from his analysis station, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. What kind of weapon are we talking about? Here? The energy readings I'm detecting from the core of this ship are beyond anything in human physics. Blue's explanation chilled everyone who heard it. The weapon uses the life force of a conscious being to guide its targeting. Someone must stay with the device until the very end, using their mind to control where the space-time rift opens. Whoever operates it will not survive. Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a mountain. This was the decision that no amount of training could prepare someone for. He could save the Kaleri refugees and give humanity a chance to escape, but only at the cost of his ship and everyone aboard who stayed behind to operate the weapon. Captain Amy Foster's voice came over the communications from inside the Kaleri ship, where she was still coordinating the evacuation of stasis pods. Admiral, we've moved about 30,000 Kaleri to human vessels, but there are still 20,000 more who need specialized life support. Dr. Adams says she needs at least 6 more hours to prepare our ships for them. 6 hours they didn't have? The Devourer ships would be in weapons range within 30 minutes, and their adaptive weapons had already learned how to counter most of humanity's defenses. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, at Commander Helen Brooks and Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker and Lisa Taylor, all of them waiting for his decision. How long to prepare this weapon? Jake asked Blue. 20 minutes to charge the core systems. But Admiral, you must understand what this means. The space-time rift will consume not just the Devourer ships, but this entire section of space. Anyone, within a light minute of the detonation, will be destroyed. Jake made his decision with the calm certainty that came from years of command experience. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, begin immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the Kaleri vessel. Priority goes to the refugee stasis pods and our own people. Move fast, but move carefully. Helen looked at him with understanding in her eyes. She had served with Jake for years and knew what he was planning. Admiral, you can't seriously be considering staying behind to operate that weapon. I can and I am, Jake replied. It's my responsibility to get as many people out of here alive as possible. That includes 20,000 Kaleri refugees and the crews of 25 human ships. Captain Foster's voice was firm when she spoke. If you're staying, Admiral, then I'm staying too. My Marines can help evacuate the remaining refugees while you and your people prepare the weapon. The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity as the evacuation continued around them. Human shuttles and transport pods moved constantly between the damaged Kaleri ship and the fleet vessels, carrying both alien refugees and human crew members to safety. Dr. Adams worked frantically to prepare the human medical base for Kaleri physiology, while engineers jury-rigged life support systems to keep the aliens alive during transport. Lieutenant Commander Danny Cooper brought the UES Hawk as close as possible to assist with the evacuation, his reconnaissance ship's cargo. Bays filled with Kaleri stasis pods. Steve Parker worked with Blue and the remaining Kaleri technicians to prepare the ancient weapon, his navigation skills helping to calculate the precise targeting needed to catch the entire Devourer fleet in the space-time rift. The Devourer ships continued their approach, their weapons charging with the same blue glow that had destroyed so many human vessels. They seemed to sense that something was happening aboard the Kaleri ship, and their formation tightened as they prepared for the final assault. Admiral, the weapon is almost ready, Blue reported. The space-time core is approaching critical energy levels. We will need someone at the control interface to guide the targeting when it fires. Jake looked around the bridge one final time. Most of his crew had been evacuated, but Helen had refused to leave, along with Lisa and a small team of volunteers who would help operate the weapon. They all knew they weren't coming back from this mission. The evacuation shuttles made their final runs as the Devourer fleet entered weapons range. The last transport carried Dr. Adams and the final group of Kaleri refugees, their stasis pods barely fitting into the crowded cargo bay. Captain Foster remained aboard the alien ship with Jake and his skeleton crew, her Marines helping to secure the weapon systems. "All evacuation shuttles are clear," reported Danny Cooper from the Hawk. "Admiral, the fleet is ready to jump to. Safety on your order." Jake watched as the Devourer ships opened fire on the human fleet. The remaining vessels scattered, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the deadly energy beams while moving to a safe distance from the weapons. Blast radius. Some ships took hits, but their shields held long enough for them to escape. "Blue, activate the weapon," Jake ordered. The Kaleri scientists' hands moved over controls that were ancient, when humanity was still learning to use fire. The ship around them began to vibrate with energies that shouldn't exist, as reality itself prepared to tear open. Jake placed his hands on the targeting interface, feeling the alien technology connect with his mind in ways that were both wonderful and terrifying. Through the weapon sensors, he could see the Devourer fleet clearly, 36 ships of destruction that had ended countless civilizations. Today, their learning and adaptation would finally come to an end. "Helen, it's been an honor serving with you," Jake said, as the weapon reached critical power. "The honor was mine, Admiral," she replied. Jake activated the weapon, guiding its terrible power toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Space itself began to tear apart, creating a wound in reality that consumed everything in its path. The Devourer ships, their adaptive shields and learning systems, their artificial intelligence and mechanical perfection, all of it disappeared. Into the hungry void. The Use Phoenix and everyone aboard vanished into the space-time rift, their sacrifice saving not only the Kaleri refugees but potentially every living species in the galaxy. The war against the Devourers had cost humanity dearly, but they had proven that even the most advanced enemy could be defeated by courage, creativity, and the willingness to pay any price for the survival of others.